morning, glory, America. Hugh Hewitt back inside the Beltway. Why am I playing Badfinger? The question of the morning. What could that possibly have to do with my return to the Beltway? Does anybody know? Does Dwayne know? Does Adam know? Does the formerly employed? Oh, you do know. Adam has a guess. What is it, Adam?
Well, it would be a spoiler alert for a certain show.
Well, that's okay. You don't have to say how it ends. You don't have to say how the show ends. You can just say it's the last
Closing credits of Breaking Bad.
It's the last song in Breaking Bad. Because my shutdown project among them has been to finally watch Breaking Bad. And because I led the advance party and the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt follows, she spent yesterday with her sister. I had Sunday to myself. So I had like the perfect Sunday in a Beltway. I've got bad news and good news and different sorts of breaking news today, but I had like the perfect Sunday in the Beltway without my wife, meaning that it would have been better had the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt been here, but she wasn't there. She comes after me. And so the Sunday that I had was to watch an episode of Breaking Bad, take a 4-mile walk through the beautiful Virginia countryside, which is in full bloom. This is the best time of the year in Virginia, April and May, and maybe September and October, but they're basically 4 months of the year when it's actually a beautiful city in which to live. The Beltway total, Virginia and downtown. Remnants of the cherry blossoms around. They're almost all gone. And came back, finished Breaking Bad finally, which is where Baby Blue comes in at the end. You wouldn't understand unless you've seen the show, but it's a great way to end it. No spoiler alert here. It's certainly in the top 5 television shows ever made. And then to go over and watch the Masters with my son and daughter-in-law, and watch Hideki Matsuyama. I love the Masters. I'm a complete and utter, amateurs only get one slot, so it's never been for me to be the low amateur there. But I love watching. I love everything about the Masters, and I did not see Major League Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred. I guess he's boycotting Georgia. He's a member of Augusta, but of course he hates Georgia. And Major League Baseball is now a blue sport, even though my Indians are atop the Central Division, having swept the Tigers, which is something we have on endless loop, having swept the Tigers. And so, having swept the Tigers, the Indians are on top of Major League Baseball Central. And then I watch Matsuyama, and my son says, I'm not much of a golf fan, so I put $20 on Matsuyama at the beginning of the day. And internet gambling is now legal in Virginia, and I frown on it. But I understand a non-golfer who has to watch it with me, trying to make it interesting. And I said, oh, that's not going to work. He has never been day 4 at Amen Corner. He had a 5-shot lead when I got over there to watch it. 5-shot lead. And he wins by 1. And it's a little bit, that's closer than it was, because he could have, he had a 2-putt from 4 feet, which I could have turned into a 4-putt, but not Matsuyama. And it's just kind of neat that the first Japanese golfer ever wins in this year. I just think it's so great with fear over anti-Asian prejudice in the United States being part of the narrative from the left. I don't think there is much of it. There are some knuckleheads always on the left and the right who are racist, but I think they're very tiny a minority in the United States, and I am concerned about attacks on any Asian American or any minority. I'm always concerned about violence against anyone and condemn it. But the cheering he got and the enormous applause from the American public is great. And I'm glad that the Japanese public and Asian Americans everywhere and Japanese Americans saw that. He's such a class guy, no English, but very, very classy exit. Very, very classy thing. Then I got to watch Mandalorian, which I haven't watched. I've saved Mandalorian for my return to the Beltway, because I am kind of like the Mandalorian of the radio. I know many people say you are the Ted Lasso of talk radio, but I'm sort of the Mandalorian of the radio, and I've been using my Mandalorian-like abilities on corporate America going blue, Coca-Cola becoming a blue soft drink, and Delta becoming a blue airline. Did not fly Delta. Did not fly Delta. I had a choice, so I didn't fly Delta. Didn't drink Coca-Cola products. I had a choice. Watch some baseball. I won't spend any money on baseball until Manfred's gone. Fay Vincent, their former commissioner, came out and basically said, "You moron." And everybody associated with the game is saying, "You moron, why did you get us in the middle of this? We want no part of your politics." And they're Rob Manfred's politics. Coca-Cola leaned on him and he folded up. And then, and only then, after the perfect Saturday, I go to work on my studio. Leave, go to the studio. And go to work on the studio, and Dwayne has broken it. There is a voice compressor, which is part of the elaborate thingamajig, which connects to the elaborate Comrex, which connects to the elaborate thingamajig 2, and the voice compressor is blown again. And honestly, if Dwayne would send me one good voice compressor, I spent hours wiring the studio, hours and hours putting it together, and he keeps sending me like the third repair job voice compressor, and the fourth and the fifth. And so I had him on the phone last night trying to walk him through his end. He can't even connect, and it's a terrible thing. And he calls his wife in to berate me. Dwayne, wasn't your wife there? By the way, I'm in Seb Gorka's studio this morning, if you're tuned in on YouTube, and you'll see two things. One, you'll see Seb Gorka's studio. Thank you, Seb. And you'll see that my next stop today is to get a haircut. I've got COVID hair, and I didn't even bother this morning. I didn't even try and hide it because it's ridiculous. It's the most hair I've ever had. So did Mrs. Radio Blogger enjoy berating me along with you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Evidence. She got to witness what I have to put up with every day.
No, what you have to put up, you broke it again. You sent me a third-rate, broken-down voice compressor that could not take a little bit of an energy surge. It fries out every 6 months. Honestly, poor Jeff Matska has to come over to the studio and bring me a new voice compressor because you won't spring for a real one.
And you know what Jeff doesn't call it? An actual engineer, do you know what Jeff actually calls it? He doesn't call it a compressor.
I don't know what kind of a diversion tactic you're attempting.
It's a voice processor.
Yeah, well, you're diverting from the obvious problem that you have sent me. Where do you go? Do you go to the thrift shop of radio equipment? Is that where you get your voice?
Because there are lots
pressers.
Because there are lots of radio
thrift shops. I assume it's on the internet. I assume that you bill me X and it really costs X minus $100, and that you're out to dinner.
I'm sure that's the case.
Because honestly, this is like the sixth one we've gone through. Can I get a new one?
Well, if your studio there didn't have the continued power supply of Beirut on a Thursday night, things would be a little bit better, and it wouldn't fry.
Do not. Glenn Youngkin's going to fix that when he's governor of Virginia. All right, let me get to the real news here. There was a terrible bit of news yesterday, which I want to tell you about, which I think is going to be a lot of news for the rest of the week. You may not have known this, but yesterday in Minneapolis, to be specific, Brooklyn Center, police, this is during the Derek Chauvin trial, the man who murdered George Floyd. Yesterday afternoon, police fatally shot a man after a traffic stop in suburban Minneapolis, reading from the Washington Post story, sparking clashes between hundreds of protesters and officers in an area where tensions are already high. It was a riot. Not protest, it was a riot. The victim's family identified him as 20-year-old Dante Wright. Hours after the shooting, hundreds of protesters surrounded the police headquarters and clashed with officers in riot gear, that would be a riot, who fired flashbangs and tear gas. The Minnesota National Guard, which is deployed to the Twin Cities for the Chauvin trial, later has tried to assist the police as numerous businesses in the area were broken into. The shooting happened before 2 p.m. when the officer stopped the car. The man drove for several blocks before striking another vehicle. He was shot while stopped. He got back into the car after he got out of the car. They found he had an outstanding warrant. They tried to arrest him. He got back into the car. I don't know how this happened. I haven't seen the video yet. And he's a black man. Brooklyn Center is about 10 miles northwest of downtown Minneapolis, where the murder trial is underway. So it's going to be a great week in the Twin Cities. Just a great week. When we come back, I'll fill you in on the rest of the news. Montreal, they've shut Montreal down again because Canada, remember the Canadian great medical system that we're supposed to live in awe of? It's broken. Stay tuned, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt back inside the Beltway, vaccinated and traveling again, ready to roll. Borrowing Seb Gorka's studio this morning, and if you are watching on my YouTube channel, you'll say, get a haircut. And I agree, get a haircut. I've had 3 haircuts in a year, each done by the fetching Mrs. Hewitt. She's not bad at it, but it's not ideal right now. And my barber is reopened. Now, I am of the old school when it comes to barbers. They have to be over 65. I prefer that they can't hear well and that they talk a lot and that it's a 12-minute deal. 12-minute haircut, $12 haircut, 12-minute haircut. That's, and if they're named Curly, that's a bonus. But Jim and Jeff were my barbers forever. Dwayne, what's the name of your barber?
Louis.
Louis. Okay, Louis would go too. I don't know the name of my barber inside the Beltway, but he does get it done in under 12 minutes. And people say it shows, but I don't care. It's short when it's done. But if you're looking right now, I'm going to walk in and his eyes are going to get wide, and he's going to say, "Have a seat," and he's going to get out the shears that they use on lawn hedges. Yeah, yes. It's basically it's a crown of silver. Now, I'm going to be able to go in without a mask, and I assume since he's ancient, he's going to not have a mask and be vaccinated. But yet, there was Dr. Fauci. Now, I like Dr. Fauci a lot. He was on the show a couple of weeks ago. He'd been on the show before. I'm not one of those conservatives that hate on Dr. Fauci, because the official toxicologist of the Hugh Hewitt Show has told me repeatedly he's just relaying whatever the state of the science is, and the state of the science has changed a lot and will continue to change a lot as they learn a lot about an emerging virus that nobody knew about a year ago, and which the Chinese destroyed the originating data on or hid it, so it took a long time to figure it out. But he's just reflecting advice that changes. But now I know what the advice is, and I've read widely, and this is just, well, first of all, let's play Governor Greg Abbott on Fox News with Chris Wallace yesterday says this, cut number 3.
We absolutely are not declaring victory at this time. We remain very vigilant and guarded and proactive in our response, but there's simple math behind the reason why we still continue to have success. Yesterday, we had the second lowest number of hospitalizations in 10 months. We have the 4th lowest positivity rate in a year and the highest number of vaccinations ever administered, exceeding now 14 million. It's because when you add all the number of vaccinations that have taken place, as well as all of the acquired immunity from all of the Texans who have been exposed and recovered from COVID-19, it means very simply it's a whole lot more difficult for COVID-19 to be spreading to other people in the state of Texas. And I got to add this real quick, Chris, and that is we did an excellent job of vaccinating our senior population that's most vulnerable to getting COVID-19.
Real quick, do you think that you have herd immunity in Texas now?
When you look at the senior population, for example, more than 70% of our seniors have received a vaccine shot. More than 50% of those who are 50 to 65 have received a vaccine shot. I don't know what herd immunity is, but when you add that to the people who have acquired immunity, it looks like it could be very close to herd immunity.
All right, so I like that. That's upbeat. And by the way, the message is go get vaccinated if you haven't been vaccinated. Every state is open to every age over the age of 16. Go get vaccinated. Now, I got Pfizer 1 and 2, and I had 36 hours of fatigue and a little bit of chills, and nothing that was like a mild case of the flu for me. And other people have no effect, like the fetching Mr. Hewitt, and other people have a worse flu. But no one's had a bad effect, and people stay for 15 minutes. I haven't seen both times no one had any kind of effect. Get vaccinated, because then you can roam around, take an Uber wherever you want to go in and have dinner, have lunch, whatever. Outside, you don't have to wear a mask at all. If you're indoors, you might wear a mask to make other people feel better until you sit down at your table. We had dinner on Thursday night with couple of couples that were older than us, and no one wore a mask. They wore a mask on the way into the restaurant just to make people feel better. It's kind of a neighborly thing to do to make people feel better, even if you're vaccinated. But we're there, and we got to keep there. And I read the bad news. There's one Israeli study that says the South African variant gets past the Pfizer second shot more than it should. Okay, so I'm at a little bit more risk than I thought I was, but I don't think I'm at much risk at all if people keep getting vaccinated. So then arrived Dr. Fauci on MSNBC with Mehdi Hassan and says a couple of things. First of all, cut number 8.
Well, I would just get back to what the president said even before he was inaugurated, that we need a universal wearing of masks. He said for at least 100 days, it may well go beyond 100 days. Everyone should be wearing a mask. They should avoid congregate settings. They should keep their distance, and they should wash their hands as often as possible. We are not out of this yet. We had 80,000 new infections the other day. Now's not the time to declare victory prematurely. We have not won this yet. We will win it, but we haven't won it yet.
Okay, now that's perfectly fine. The president did say 100 days before he was elected, and it's almost 100 days since he said that. And I still wear a mask when I go to sit down in a restaurant and when I'm indoors. I went to the Safeway yesterday, wore my mask because all the help there are wearing masks. You want to assure them, right? It's not about me. I can't get sick. I've been vaccinated. And the risk of my getting sick is about the risk of my getting hit by a car. And that happens. You ever walk around Virginia? That happens a lot. The way people drive in Virginia, the roads are built for the Revolutionary War and they haven't been improved. Another reason to vote for Glenn Youngkin for governor is because Northern Virginia roads have not been, well, they might have been improved after the 1812 invasion by the Brits, but it's been since then. And the Civil War, they made some new roads for the Union troops marching down to Richmond, but since then they haven't built any new roads. And so that's Northern Virginia. So you might, Glenn Youngkin. We can't let Terry McAuliffe back here because he was governor once before. He didn't build any roads. I don't know why you'd let him be governor again. It's the only thing that matters to Virginians are guns and roads. And really, that's it. And Virginia is, in the Wall Street Journal survey, the most popular place for people to retire to in the United States. It's number one because the taxes are low and they leave you alone. Most of now, Democrats got elected and they're running the state, but Virginia Democrats are not like California Democrats. Virginia Democrats are more like John F. Kennedy Democrats, most of them. And Ralph Northam, last seen wearing a Ku Klux Klan headdress in his medical school photo, has been rather unobtrusive since then. But Terry McAuliffe, oh, spare me. If I had a producer, I'd play what Terry McAuliffe thinks of me. Because Terry McAuliffe thinks of me what I do not think of him. Terry McAuliffe esteems me, so he's not going to like the fact that I'm out there working for Glenn Youngkin every day. So Anthony Fauci gives a first good swing at the bat. But here he is, and he goes off the rails, cut number 9.
No, it's still not okay for the simple reason that the level of infection, the dynamics of infection in the community are still really disturbingly high. Like just yesterday, there were close to 80,000 new infections, and we've been hanging around 60, 70, 75,000. So if you're not vaccinated, please get vaccinated as soon as vaccine becomes available to you. And if you are vaccinated, please remember that you still have to be careful and not get involved in crowded situations, particularly indoors where people are not wearing masks. And for the time being, until we show definitively that a person who's vaccinated does not get the subclinical infection and can spread to others, you should also continue to wear a mask for the time being.
This is nuts. This is bad advice. This is not good public health advice. The key public health objective right now is to get people to get vaccinated. The message Tony Fauci just gave is that it doesn't matter if you get vaccinated, you can't live your life. That's not true. If you get vaccinated, you can go to a restaurant. You don't have to wear a mask at dinner. You can fly on an airline. They ask you to wear a mask. I did as a courtesy to others, but you are not at risk. And you can go indoors. You can walk into a bar. If you're vaccinated, you're fine. And that is clinically shown. That's the science. What he refers to is a mythical possibility that some people who have been vaccinated might get, remember, you know that word subclinical? That means like a tiny, tiny little chance that you might still get the vaccine. You might get the virus, and we can't tell because you've got vaccination, so we don't know you've got it, and you might be able to give it to someone. There's no science for that. That's their worst case scenario. And that is contra getting people to get the vaccine because it sends the message, why get a vaccine? You get a vaccine so you can renew your ordinary life. Go get the vaccine. I'm very in favor of getting the vaccine. The more people get the vaccine, we drive down the new case numbers. The new case numbers are not coming from people who are vaccinated. People who are vaccinated can go back to their normal life. They may want to wear a mask. They have to wear a mask on an airline. And I think that is generally for people's comfort level, not your own. You're fine. The plane might crash, but you're not going to get COVID if you've been vaccinated. All right, that's just not a risk. Other people are close. You're just trying to keep them calm. You don't need to make a statement about you got a vaccine. They don't have a vaccine. Don't be that guy. But honestly, Dr. Fauci, you can't keep stepping on your story. Your story is, if you get the vaccine, life goes back to normal. That's the story. That's the truth. And they've just, honestly, he doesn't know anything about messaging after a full year. He does not know anything about messaging. John Thune knows about messaging. He gave a message yesterday about the border, which I want you to hear. Cut number one.
I think restore funding to build a wall. The Border Patrol down there says how critical that is to border security. I think restoring the MPP, the Migrant Protection Plan, which was essentially a program which was essentially keeping those who are seeking asylum in Mexico until such time as their cases can be heard and adjudicated. Now we're bringing everybody into the United States. We don't have the capacity to hear those cases, and so they're being released and told to come back at a later time, and most don't. So, I mean, there were policies in place under the previous administration, Trump policies, that were effective and that were working. This administration made a decision early on. We want to do opposite of what President Trump did. They were warned by the Border Patrol in advance that if you do these things, this is what's going to happen. This is now what's happened. We've got the highest number of people coming illegally across the border that we've seen in 15 years. So
that is exactly the right message. Put the Trump policies back and finish the wall, and we will not have this problem. Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway in Seb Gorka's studio because mine blew up again. I am talking with Salena Zito, columnist for the New York Post and the Washington Examiner. And I have good news and bad news, Salena.
What?
Well, the good news is the Pirates aren't the worst team in the National League. The Washington Nationals are. But the bad news is they're pretty awful.
I wouldn't know. I'm not watching.
Well, I'm watching. I'm just not buying. I won't buy any merch and I won't buy any tickets, but I'll watch. That's my mini boycott. I don't encourage people to do whatever they want. Rob Manfred is the villain here, not your pathetic Pirates. But it's a good year to not watch because let me tell you, they're bad.
Well, I have been unhappy with my Pirates for a couple of years, was beginning with selling off the entire team, beginning with Andrew McCutchen.
Well, they did do that. They did do that. They did do that.
Yeah, and their lack of investment in the city and the supporters. So I've been mad at them for a couple of years.
Well, maybe they'll get a stimulus check. Now, let me talk to you about your New York Post column. It had a great stat in it, which I did not know before. You actually say the American Petroleum Institute study shows that the oil and gas industry contributes $34.7 billion to the Pennsylvania economy, with more than 1,347 businesses across the entire state as part of the supply chain, and as many as 600,000 jobs are at risk with the fracking ban imminent. That is really, Pennsylvania still voted for Biden. I don't get it.
Yeah, but barely. Pennsylvania is a state that's on the cusp. In 2016, Donald Trump barely won. In 2020, Joe Biden barely won. and I will argue forever and a day that that Donald Trump lost the state on the backs of senior citizens. That's where he lost the vote, and not within his coalition.
So why do you think seniors didn't vote for him?
I think a lot of it had to do with comportment. You look at the numbers, you see how much they moved away from them. Seniors tend to not vote for themselves as much as they vote for their children and their grandchildren. And I think that, my interview showed that a lot of them were just unhappy in particular with how he handled COVID. And for them, for a lot of them, they thought, when he got COVID, he handled it with a lot of vigor, and at least what we saw. And while young conservatives, this was really interesting. While young conservatives under the age of 50, liked that, and that was very appealing to them. Those over the age of I shouldn't say 60, 50. Those over the age of 60 did not like it. Probably, I'm going to guess. This is me speculating now, but I'm going to speculate that has to do with a lot of people didn't have that ability to handle it with that vigor.
Oh no! In fact, a lot of seniors died. Let me ask you something, Salena. I've been covering closely the Missouri Senate race. Had Eric Schmidt on last week and Jason Smith the week before. I think the only Republican who can lose Missouri is named Greitens. But Mayor Quentin Lucas of Kansas City was also on. He'll be a formidable candidate. And I've had on everyone in Ohio, and I think that's going to be like a line of 30. But I don't know who's running in Pennsylvania for Pat Toomey's seat. Is there anybody? Is there a Republican running?
I mean, they haven't all announced yet, but I'm definitely expecting Sean Parnell to run, and I think he would be a formidable candidate in our home state. He barely lost to Connor Lamb. He has an incredible ability to not only be appealing to the conservative populace that we talk about a lot, but he's also very appealing to suburban voters. He started out as a Marco Rubio supporter and an advocate for him early on in the campaign in 2016. So I suspect he's going to be a formidable candidate for U.S. Senate. And on the Democrat side, you have, I think everyone in the kitchen sink is running for Senate.
So you think Sean Parnell's going to, see, I have not read that anywhere. And that would be good news because I don't think any of the congressmen actually carry enough of swagger or the right demo. Sean Parnell's the right demo. He's a young combat veteran, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Also a successful businessman. David Drucker had a piece yesterday in the Examiner about it. He's the one to watch in Pennsylvania, and I think he will be successful in that race.
Well, I'll have to start having him on. You gave me a tip this morning, Salena, and for that I am grateful. I'm sorry about your Pirates, but keep coming back. I hope you're right about Sean Parnell. I'll go look up the Drucker piece during the break and bring the news of it. I missed it, but yesterday I was watching Breaking Bad, The Masters, and The Mandalorian. So that was. I had a day that fetching Mrs. Hewitt with her sister, bringing up the rear on the move back to the Beltway, and so I had a full bachelor day.
You guys have to check out my piece with Ty Cobb's great-grandson in the Examiner. That was pretty interesting.
I will go and see all things Salena Zito are at salenazito.com. Go and sign up for that, and I'll be right back, America. Hour number 2 of the Monday edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show straight ahead. Thank you, Salena. Shore High, Canada. Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway again. Back inside the Beltway. Back with Jake Sherman of punchbowlnews.com. Just reading my Punchbowl News email during the break. Good morning, Jake. How are you?
I'm good, Hugh. How are you?
Well, this is the time to come back to the Beltway. I'm delayed. I normally come back in February, but I had to wait for my second vaccine shot. But boy, what a glorious day yesterday inside the Beltway. I hope you were out and about and not working all day.
I was watching the Masters. I have a TV in my backyard, which is a COVID COVID discovery, and I was watching the Masters outside, so I was very
Well,
happy
you
about
know, I'm so glad he won. I just thought it was a great, great tournament, but I didn't think he had a prayer. I was watching with my son, and he had a 5-shot lead, and I said, but he hadn't gone around Amen Corner ever on the 4th day of the Masters, and he ends up winning by 1. It was just great. Wasn't it a great tournament?
it. It was, and it's good to see Matsuyama win. He, 10 years ago, he was the low amateur, so
yes,
this is a pretty amazing feat.
Yes. In fact, Warren, Ohio's own Bobby Lewis Jr., a previous low amateur at the Masters, never, ever got close to being the green jacket man. Let me talk to you, Jake, first before I go to the Punch Bowl News today. I have been doing research on what various cities get. I had Quentin Lucas on last week, and under the stimulus, Kansas City gets $200 million. Under the stimulus, San Francisco gets $600 million. I can't figure out New York City's number yet, but the state of New York gets $100 billion. So I'm guessing the city of New York gets more than a couple of $1 billion. If the state gets $100 billion, the city's going to get a couple of billion. Do you know what Atlanta got?
No idea.
$165 million. So how does Raphael Warnock defend that in his reelection race against Herschel Walker? I mean, I'm now going to look for a list of cities, and we're going to see that San Francisco won and New York City won. It's a blue state bailout. How in the world is Raphael Warnock going to defend that?
Well, Georgia at the moment, at least at a federal level, is a blue state. So, but no, listen, this is a more. I'm gonna take this in a direction that I'm assuming you didn't think I would, but I would argue that this is an argument for earmarks because the administration has far too much power in dispersing federal funds and programming federal funds, and that's what people have argued for years in arguing for the return of earmarks. So, but I hear you on that. I mean, that's a tough thing if Herschel Walker runs and if he makes the argument that the Democratic senators that you've elected are not bringing home the proverbial bacon, then perhaps that is a winning argument. But Herschel Walker hasn't even said he's going to run yet.
Well, here's Herschel Walker yesterday talking to Maria Bartiromo on Fox, cut number 7.
I'm very honored that they would consider me running for the Senate. And, my family, we're still going through this process of praying and really considering it. And at the same time, I take it very serious. And people want me to decide, like, right now. And I said, guys, I'm going to take my time because this is a very serious thing. But I will tell you this. Herschel Walker believe in God. I believe in this country. I believe in the people. And I'm going to fight for the people of Georgia if I run. So just stay tuned. And I tell you what, it's going to be exciting.
So, Jake, you've heard a lot of candidates talk about running. What did that sound like to you?
Sounds like he's running.
Yep. Yep.
Yep. Like he's running. I don't know anything. I mean, obviously, I know who Herschel Walker is. I know the details of his playing career. I know he's a conservative. I have no idea what else is done in his life, and I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm just saying who knows how a race like that would shape up between two candidates in a very high stakes and what would be an extraordinarily expensive Senate race. And by the way, a weird Senate race too, right? Because Warnock was just elected in 2020 and will be up again. So yeah, but that would certainly be interesting, and I think there would be a lot of other candidates who would get in. I'm assuming Doug Collins would be one of them, and I'm assuming there's a lot of other interested Georgia Republicans as well, and maybe Marjorie Taylor Greene runs.
Look, Marjorie Taylor Greene is not going to even get her nomination again. They're going to redistrict her out of existence. I think Herschel's going to run. I don't think anyone could tackle Herschel in Georgia, except Nick Chubb. If Nick Chubb wants to go back and run, he could give Herschel a run for it. But Nick has got 10 more years with the Browns. Honestly, I think he'd run away with it. I think Doug Jones will run against Brian Kemp. But let's leave that aside. I do think I would love to see reporting, and I haven't seen reporting yet, not on earmarks. There were no earmarks in the stimulus. There was a formula which effectively acted like a stimulus, and that formula deeply benefited San Francisco. And I think that was a tragic decision for the country and a political mistake of monumental consequence to the Democrats. You can't give $600 million to a little city and screw every other city like Atlanta and expect people not to notice, Jake. And I'm going to look for Punchbowl or somebody to do a list of the cities, because I can find each city, but I haven't seen a list anywhere.
Yeah, the formula. I've heard the reporting, I've heard the analysis in San Francisco benefits more than other cities. I don't know. I mean, listen, Nancy Pelosi's the speaker, right? I mean, that's kind of how the cookie crumbles. If San Francisco benefits, I mean, that's kind of old school political congressional muscle, and that happens. You know what I mean? And I'm not excusing it. I'm not saying it's right or wrong or indifferent. I'm just saying that's how, people in New York and San Francisco, represented by Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, the two Democratic leaders, are going to get more money. That's kind of the way it works, right?
So shouldn't reporters be traveling behind Raphael Warnock saying, what's your opinion of Atlanta getting $165 million and San Francisco getting $600 million and New York getting X?
For sure. Absolutely. And by the way, you know what he would say I'm assuming, I have no idea, but if I just having covered him and other politicians, he would say, yeah, I wish we got more. I wish I fought for more, and I'm going to keep fighting for more.
He's going to get killed on that. Let me, though, talk about what Punchbowl News says. Infrastructure bill. Don Young of Alaska, who loves everything that has his wife's name on it, is going over to the White House today. That doesn't matter because they'll get it through the House. What matters is whether they get Joe Manchin's vote for a reconciliation bill with infrastructure in it. I read his Washington Post column to say, do not bring me another reconciliation bill this year. I'm not going that way. How did you read it, Jake Sherman?
I read that too. And by the way, you were right. You and I talked about this on the air a couple weeks ago. He has restated and doubled down, tripled down, quadrupled down on his I'm not changing the filibuster. So, listen, I mean, he is the most powerful person in Washington right now, and I don't know how he would react to a reconciliation bill because it seems to be that the Democratic leadership's point of view is to show that Republicans don't want to work with Democrats. Not me saying it. This is what they say. And thereby the only way to advance big legislative priorities is by reconciliation, or blowing up the filibuster. But I could just tell he's getting sick of it. Now, at the end of the day, does he back off and allow it to pass by reconciliation? He might. I think he's less firm on that than he is on the filibuster.
I think that's correct. And by the way, they get one more reconciliation, and every traditionalist would say that. Doesn't mean he's going to vote for it, and they need every vote. But Bernie Sanders wants to expand Medicare. Nancy Pelosi wants to expand Medicare or Obamacare. And Joe Manchin is sitting there saying, bring me pork to West Virginia. Bring me bridges, roads, and federal buildings.
By the way, that's a tried and true tradition in West Virginia.
Yeah. Yeah, and so there's a big difference between expanding Medicare and building federal buildings. And I just think they got to do whatever Joe Manchin wants.
They do. He is the key to everything Joe Biden wants to do. And the more liberals and Democrats gripe about that, the worse off they'll be.
I 100% agree. They got to leave him alone, and they got to leave Kristen Sinema alone. But you know what Kristen Sinema's not going to vote for? She's not going to vote for abolishing stepped-up basis. Do you know if they abolish stepped-up basis in Arizona, she will not win re-election. Arizona has made a lot of money on housing, and those people are not going to get rid of stepped-up bases and ranching stepped-up bases and farming stepped-up. They just not. That's an ag and housing state.
And also, I mean, even more basic than that, could she vote to raise the corporate tax rate? Could she vote to? I mean, there's a ton of provisions in there that are just landmines for Democrats, and that they're going to have to figure out if they could live with or without.
All right, last question, Jake. Minnesota had a riot last night. They had another officer-involved death shooting in Brooklyn Heights, suburb of Minnesota. They had a riot last night. How rough is it going to be in Minnesota this week?
I imagine quite rough. I mean, the trial is still going on in Minneapolis. The tensions are already heightened. The national media is all over this story and is broadcasting the trial kind of wire to wire. It's going to be tense.
Very tense. Jake Sherman on Twitter, punchbowlnews.com. You ought to get his newsletter every morning. It's got the best stuff in it. Thank you, Jake. Stay tuned. America knows where to vote on May 8th. Good morning, Glenn Youngkin. Welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Good morning, Hugh. Thanks again for having me. It's always such a pleasure to be with you.
Well, I saw you were down in the southern part of the state over the weekend talking about other things. I want to start with, how do you actually get registered to vote as a Republican in the convention on May 8th, and where do you register to vote?
Well, Hugh, first of all, this convention on May the 8th is a distributed convention, meaning everyone's going to vote in different spots across this great Commonwealth. To register, you can come to our website at youngkinforgovernor.com. Now, reality is some of the county due dates have passed. We still have about half of the counties and municipalities in Virginia that are still accepting applications to vote, but about half have passed. And so I would encourage everybody who's listening to please come to our website at youngkinforgovernor.com. Let us help you get registered so that you can participate. Hugh, what we've seen across this Commonwealth, and I've traveled nearly 14,000 miles in a little over 2 months. And I've heard from Virginian after Virginian after Virginian, we want to participate in this Republican convention. Glenn, we're for you. In the first 34 counties, we actually represented slightly more than half of the delegate filings. The other 6 candidates represented the other half. So we're doing great with super support from across the Commonwealth. So I just want as many people as possible to participate in this convention because, Hugh, we know the Republican Party is going to win through addition and multiplication, not through subtraction and division.
Now, Youngkin for governor. It's young as in I'm a young guy, and kin is kith and kin. Youngkin, FORgovernor.com, and it says become a delegate. You hit that button, and if you're allowed to register, you'll be able to register. Then what do you have to do on May 8th? I'm calling you governor already, Glenn Youngkin.
Well, I appreciate it, Hugh, because that's where we're going. We're going to win on May 8th, and we're going to win again in November. We're going to beat Terry McAuliffe, whoever else the Democrats throw at us. But on May 8th, then you'll have a drive-through moment where you'll pull up to the polling booth. You'll actually drop off your ballot. It's a rank-ordered choice ballot. Candidate 1, Candidate 2, Candidate 3, Candidate 4, Candidate 5. For governor, for lieutenant governor, and for attorney general, that's all you're voting on. And I'd ask everybody to put me down as your first choice, please. Please put me down as your first choice, and we'll go win this thing on May 8th and move forward and go win in November.
Now, I personally am only going to, in the old days, we used to call it throwing a bullet when there was a ranked choice. I'm just going to put you on there, Glenn Youngkin, because I don't want to inadvertently cast a vote for somebody else who comes in and beats you because they get a second place vote. I don't know how it works. It's a crazy system. Is it strategically better just to vote for Glenn Youngkin, or is it better to vote for 5 people?
I'm going to let people choose how they want to vote. If somebody wants to put me down as their only choice, I'll absolutely be happy about that. And if folks want a rank order choice, that's fine. The key is to put me down as your top choice, and I would just be deeply humbled if everyone would do that. And Hugh, I'm so grateful for you doing that.
Well, I'm going to do that now. Do they send me my ballot, or do I have to pick it up at one of those 38 locations?
There will be a ballot that will be made available for you when you get there, and each jurisdiction may send it ahead of time to you as well, but you'll have to show up with a photo ID, Hugh.
Okay, I've got that. I'm ready. I like photo ID. I think that's a good thing. Now let's talk a little bit about the issues, Glenn Youngkin. I told people there are only 2 issues for me: roads, which have not been improved since the Civil War, and taxes, which are going up under the Democrats. Talk to me about both of those.
Let's start with taxes, because that's going to impact the way that the Biden administration is thinking about roads. So first, in Virginia particularly, Virginia unfortunately is not competitive anymore. Our taxes have gone up, and our peer states, our taxes, particularly in Tennessee and North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, and Texas, are all the states we compete against for jobs and for companies and for families. And what we've seen is families moving away to these states from Virginia in order to find a lower cost of living and better job opportunities. We have to get our taxes down. As your governor, I'm going to work like crazy to get them down. I've got a great senior economic advisor, Stephen Moore, is working with us in order to figure out how to get our taxes down, and we're targeting getting them to 0 because we need to in order to compete. And then I think the second big topic for us is of course what's happening in transportation and infrastructure. And here we have the Biden administration coming forth with their infrastructure bill. And there is so little infrastructure in their infrastructure bill, just like there was so little COVID in their COVID spending bill. And here we have government again trying to move forward with big spending. And by definition, what comes behind it is increased taxes. And so we do need to spend money on infrastructure. We absolutely do need to. Virginia has got a low grade in infrastructure. And our country has a terrible grade in infrastructure. And actual spending makes some sense if it's done with some fiscal discipline. But to have a $2.3 trillion spending bill on the back of a $1.9 trillion COVID spending bill is actually irresponsible fiscally. And we can target what we want to get done. I love the fact that a number of Republican senators are in fact saying that we could repurpose some of the misallocated money in the $1.9 trillion COVID spending bill towards infrastructure and cover it all. So this is a spot where, as governor, I'm going to focus on making sure that we're investing appropriately in our infrastructure, because we must. But it can be a combination, yes, of some government support coming from these bills, but public-private partnerships will prove to be an amazing opportunity for us on infrastructure spending. And one of the first ones we have to drive to is, in fact, rural broadband. In Virginia, it is a giant challenge. And as governor, this is going to be at the top of my list on our infrastructure agenda, is to make sure that all of Virginia, particularly our rural areas, have access to high-speed internet. The challenge, of course, today is the career politicians are looking at 20-year-old solutions about burying cable and digging trenches over hills and under streams. It's like we're going to grandmother's house again. But at the end of the day, we got to look up, because we have new technology. We have low orbit satellites that, in fact, other states are using effectively, like North Carolina. And here we are in Virginia yet again, not competing, not staying with the times. And so we are going to press forward with infrastructure investment. And at the top of the list is going to be rural access to high-speed internet.
You know, Governor, I keep doing that. Glenn Youngkin is my guest. He's going to be the next governor of Virginia. And in a moment, I may play the Terry McAuliffe. Terry used to come on the show until he found out I wouldn't support him for governor. In fact, here's what he used to say, Glenn Youngkin.
I'm Terry McAuliffe, and you should listen to the Hugh Hewitt Show every single day, the greatest radio show in the United States of America.
So there you have the great Terry McAuliffe endorsing me, and I'm endorsing Glenn Youngkin, Virginians. Now, Glenn Youngkin, here's an anecdotal story. And we know that anecdotal evidence is evidence of anecdotes and nothing else. But I came back late because I had to get vaccinated in Virginia, and I spent January in California. I had to get vaccinated in California, excuse me. And in the interim, Orange County Airport opened a direct flight to Nashville. And that's, you know, it just sort of astonished me. So many Californians are going to Nashville, you know, the entertainment capital down there, and they have zero income tax. And my friend, the Butler graduate who managed to figure out the best place to live is where the taxes are lowest, he's moving to Tennessee. Everybody's going to Tennessee because it's zero income tax, like Florida, and it's not, and I think Virginia is at 5.5 and going up. It's not California 13.5, but I mean, that's going to impact who comes here.
It is. And by the way, Virginia's 5 3/4 at the top bracket today. It escalates. But this gets back to my comment about our senior economic advisor, Stephen Moore. So I asked Stephen, where do you live? He says, I live in Maryland. I said, you live in Maryland? Why don't you live in Virginia? And he says, the aggregate taxes in Virginia are higher than they are in Maryland. I mean,
wow.
This is the challenge that we've got. Virginia has stacked taxes on top of taxes, real estate taxes, sales taxes, income taxes, car taxes. And when you layer all this stuff up together, Hugh, we actually are no longer even competitive. The fastest growing states in America, the fastest growing cities in America are low or no income tax jurisdictions. We have to compete. And oh, by the way, where are Virginia families moving to? And by the way, we have been a net exporter of families the last few years. More families moving away than moving here. And they're going to Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, and Texas. They're going for job opportunities, and they're going for a lower cost of living. This is so frustrating to me because Virginia should be the best state in America to live and work and raise a family. And if we don't get moving on our overall tax burden on companies and our tax burden particularly on families, we are going to shrink our way to nothingness. And we all know you cannot shrink your way to prosperity. And we're going to get moving the other direction. When I'm governor, we're going to get our taxes down. We're going to compete like crazy because I want families to stay here. I want our kids, when they graduate from community college or trade school or from our 4-year universities, to stay here. I actually want businesses to come back here. Our governor has shut businesses. We've had 25% of Virginia's businesses over the last 12 months either fully closed or temporarily closed. And this is just not right, Hugh. So we can get this moving, but we have to compete. And personal income tax rates is right at the top of the list. And that's what Stephen Moore has been so great in helping us with. I had 30 years of business experience. I know one thing. I know how to get stuff done. And one of the things we're going to get done is we're going to get our taxes down so we can go compete with the likes of Tennessee and North Carolina and Florida and Texas for our families.
We're going to repeat this message every Monday until May 8th, and then on May 8th, I'm going to remind people. But in the meantime, you've got to be registered to vote. There are a few places in the GOP primary. It's a convoluted system. Go to YoungkinForGovernor.com, and they'll help you become a delegate like I did and the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt did, because we actually want to stay in Virginia. We don't want to get driven out. A lot of my friends are going to Florida and Tennessee. I don't want to do that. I already am a tax refugee from California, and I do not want Virginia to go that way. And California back home in Virginia, and happy to do that. But the worst possible news that could happen to Minnesota happened yesterday. Brooklyn Center, which is a suburb of the Twin Cities, police stopped and then fatally shot a black man, age 20, in the middle of the Derek Chauvin trial. To discuss this, I'm joined by James Hohmann. James, a columnist for the Washington Post. He's also a native of the Twin Cities. He's been covering the Chauvin trial in his Washington Post column. Good morning, James. How are you?
I'm good, Hugh. Good morning. I'm glad you got vaccinated.
I did. I'm rolling around Virginia yesterday. Gorgeous weekend in the Beltway. Great Masters golf tournament. The Indians are atop the AL Central ahead of the Twins, so that's wonderful too. Got to watch some Mandalorian. I'm just all happy, and then I wake up and I see this happened in Brooklyn Center. First of all, I don't remember Brooklyn Center, and I've been to Minnesota like 30 times. Do you know it well?
Yeah, not well, but I mean, there's a lot of weird, small first and second tier suburbs. You know, there was also the Philando Castile incident in 2017 where his girlfriend Facebook streamed him getting shot by police. That was in Falcon Heights, which is another kind of super tiny speck of a suburb just outside the Twin Cities, similar to this. So there's a bunch of little cities like that. You know, obviously this is terrible in the sense that it is deeply destabilizing. Everyone's already on edge. You know, as the weather gets nicer, a lot of people looking for reasons to be out on the streets, which is always a dangerous combination.
Well, weather getting nicer in Minnesota is like a 1 week window, but so we're not there yet. But nevertheless, this young man, black, is Brooklyn Center predominantly black?
Yeah.
Okay, so they had a riot last night after he was killed. Unlike, I haven't seen any tape. I think George Floyd was murdered. I don't think there's any doubt that he's going to be convicted. It might be manslaughter. I don't know. That's up for the jury. There is, by the way, no conflict in a journalist declaring their opinion. I think O.J. murdered the two victims there, too, and I've been saying that for years. And I think Chauvin murdered George Floyd. But I have no idea about this. What's this look like to you? Have you been covering it? Have you been following it?
I also haven't seen the video yet, so I don't want to offer an opinion of this. But I mean, it's one of those things where I think it's you know, obviously it's imperative. The state's now led by Democrats, and they have to calm folks down. You know, and even if Chauvin's guilty, whether whatever you think of the tape, like he's getting a fair trial, which is what he deserves. And so I think there's a lot of liberals running the state right now, and so it's important that they, I think, be measured to prevent more rioting.
Well, they have the National Guard deployed, but there was still rioting last night. The National Guard can't be everywhere, and the Twin Cities are a sprawling. It's sprawling. I would get lost there. There's one road. Pawlenty rebuilt it after the bridge fell down, but there's like one road in and out of the Twin Cities. And it goes everywhere, every which way, right? It's a very. What did Jesse Ventura say that St. Paul was
drunken Irishman?
Yeah, drunken Irishman had designed St. Paul. It is a nightmare to drive around in, but St. Paul hasn't been home to any violence, has it?
No, and I mean, these things, as you know, in this age of social media and everything, this stuff can be very contagious nationally. So hopefully cooler heads prevail.
Okay. Now, in terms of the trial itself, Andrew McCarthy was on with my friend Dennis Prager, and I'll get Andy on. He's very good as a former federal prosecutor, and he believes that the defense had some good moments last week, but and you've written about, they're going to attempt to say he died because of heart complications relating to fentanyl and methamphetamine use. I don't think you can get away with 9 minutes of the knee on the back with that argument. I just don't think it flies. What do you think, James Hohmann?
Yeah, no, I actually think you can sort of defend the first couple minutes. I think a jury, if Derek Chauvin had taken his knee off the neck at 2 minutes, or when George Floyd stopped resisting, Floyd was resisting arrest. He had to be taken down and detained. But no matter how much was in his system, that just the 9.5 minutes, you just really can't explain that to a jury. And I've watched every minute of this trial, and the jury keeps seeing long clips of this video and, this officer's knee on this guy who's totally not responsive. I actually thought the defense had a great Friday. The medical examiner, you kind of understood why the prosecution waited to have him until the 10th day of the trial, because he did say, he acknowledged telling investigators that if George Floyd had been found in his own home with the door locked, that he would have called it a fentanyl overdose. He said that he's called things a fentanyl overdose for basically 3 milligrams in the system, and George Floyd had 15 milligrams in his system. But then the medical examiner did say, it was clear that he died because of the knee on the neck. But there was enough there during the medical examiner's testimony that you could see if Chauvin isn't convicted where reasonable doubt was starting to pop up a little bit. I think that the prosecution is going to rest their case today. They're going to have one more use of force expert, and then they're going to have a member of Floyd's family. And then tomorrow, Eric Nelson, the defense attorney, gets his chance to start doing this, offering his case. And I do think a lot of it will be trying to say Floyd not just would have died of drugs anyway, but that he was resisting arrest and that merited kind of the harsher treatment by police. It's worked in the very recent past. I don't think it will work in this case for the reasons you identified.
No, I do not know anything about the officer, the former officer. I do know, I can't say no. I remember from Crimes 40 years ago and Criminal Procedure 39 years ago with Peter Weston and Jerry Israel, respectively, that manslaughter is a convenient way out for juries that know something bad has happened, and there might be a contributory negligence element in terms of civil law, but it's not that in criminal law, but that the defendant has not got clean hands. All right, so he resisted arrest, he wouldn't get in the car, he needed to be subdued, but manslaughter is a way out. I don't know how he gets away with other than manslaughter, and he might get the wanton disregard for human life charge. Right. I just don't see it. But the question is, will he testify? What is speculation? Will the former officer testify, James Hohmann?
The speculation is that he's not going to, that he's not expected to. But, if my life was on the line, I think, he could explain his side of the story. Obviously, there are very sound legal reasons for him not to testify, and I imagine he's not going to, but I think he probably should. I think that actually could help make the jury a little sympathetic.
Yeah, there's only one thing. I don't know what his past record is, and so I don't know if he's been involved in police shootings before, or if there's stuff that they do not want brought in and cross-examined on. But if he goes to state of mind, I think it goes to, I'm worried about the crowd. I'm worried about the crowd. I'm afraid. I'm scared. And that is, has anyone else been charged? Have his officers, fellow officers, been charged in any way?
Yes. So the other 3 officers who were on the scene have been charged with all lesser crimes. And 2 of them were in their first week on the job. And their trials, all 3 of their trials are scheduled for August.
And so whether or not he gets on will matter a great deal to them. But also in the aftermath, this Brooklyn Center shooting, I want to go back there and finish up there, James. Those people have to get out. Brooklyn Center officials have to get out in front of this as soon as possible and put the body cam footage out there. I mean, I don't see, if they don't, everyone will assume it's terrible. Am I correct?
Absolutely. And that's you have to move very fast on these things now if you're a local leader.
Are you going back to the Twin Cities to report more? I know you've watched it all. Are you going to go back there for the aftermath?
I want to go back when they rest. I think I'll go back for when the defense rests to be there when the verdict comes and watch the kind of impact it has on the community.
All right, James Hohmann, I've been reading your columns. Good stuff over at the Washington Post. I appreciate your joining me this morning. Look forward to talking to you after the defense rests and as you write from there. Thank you, James. Don't go anywhere, America. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, joined now by old friend Karl Rove. Hello, Karl. How are you?
Good morning, sir.
I want to begin by asking you to give Tony Fauci some advice. I like Dr. Fauci. He was on the show a couple of times just last week. But he keeps going on and telling people in essence that if you get vaccinated, it doesn't make a difference in your life. You still have to wear a mask in a restaurant. Is that not a mixed message, Karl? Shouldn't he just be telling people, go back to normal, get vaccinated, and have a life?
Look, I guess so. I frankly, I've been vaccinated, so is my wife. But when I go into a restaurant, I wear a mask. And I'll tell you, the only reason I do that is I don't want people looking at me saying, do I need to keep away from that guy? I want to be back to totally normal. I'm living, I live in Texas, so we mostly are back to normal. But I don't, that's just a personal decision on my part.
Well, I wear it on the airplane, and I wear it in the Safeway, and I'm vaccinated too, and I wear it on the way to sit down. Then I take it off, and I don't wear it outside. But I think he's got to start emphasizing that your life does get a lot better when you're vaccinated. You just don't worry as much.
Exactly. In fact, we ought to be talking about how we're getting vaccinated, because I'm finding we had some damage during the snowmageddon here in Texas, because we don't build our houses like they build them in Minnesota, and there are a lot of work crew around, and they're very good about coming in and saying they've got the mask on, and they say, and then Mr. Rove, I've got my mask on, and I said, you know what, don't worry, I'm vaccinated. Are you vaccinated? And so I've ended up talking to them, and frankly, they're looking for, some people are looking for confirmation, validation that they should go get vaccinated, and nothing bad's going to happen. Well, didn't you feel sick, Mr. Rove? No, I didn't. I felt a little uncomfortable for a day, but you know what? Go get your vaccination. That's the way you won't get sick. And so, we've all got a responsibility to take care of ourselves and our friends and our families and those that we come in contact with. So yeah, I'm like you. I wear my mask into the restaurant, and then I take it off. And you'll notice, particularly here in Texas, people are eating outdoors, and I suspect a lot of them are still vaccinated, but it's just a lot more comfortable to be doing it that way and not have people looking at you and thinking, are you or are you not vaccinated? Are you or are you not taking some care and concern about me?
You see, and I think that's a fine message. I just wish Dr. Fauci would get, he needs some messaging training. Now let's move to politics. Just had Glenn Youngkin on. I know you no longer live in Virginia. I do. I want him to be the GOP nominee. But this is the craziest damn system I've ever seen, the primary, distributed primary. But is that done to frustrate Youngkin by party insiders, or is that just Virginia is living in the 19th century?
Well, I don't know what it is, but I don't know what the rationale is, but it's a bad system. Make up your mind. Either have a convention or have a primary. And when the party couldn't get its act together to do a virtual convention, then it should have gone to a primary. It's in the hands of the state party executive committee. And frankly, I'm a much bigger fan of doing a primary if they want to get back into the majority, because they have to have the kind of activity that goes on in a primary. In a primary, you're trying to get out a large number of voters. You have a firehouse convention primary, or whatever the heck they're calling this, and you're trying to get out the true ardent believers who come out each and every time for these kind of deals. And as a result, you're talking to a very much smaller crowd in a very insular way, and you do not allow yourself to get a broad message out and a bigger awareness of who you are and what you're all about. So yeah, we got it. Virginia is not a state that we can allow to float away.
And it need not float away. Glenn Youngkin is a fine candidate. There are normal people who can run in Virginia, center-right people who could win. What a half-assed thing to do. Let me get to the split in the GOP, Karl Rove. Now, I don't want to overstate it. I believe there are some people who have monetized the split in the GOP. So the hard right, really 105% Trumpists versus the never Trumpers. They have a monetary interest in keeping the party divided. I'm a McConnellist. I am in the middle. Do you think it's overstated or is it real?
Well, it's real, but it is also overstated because remember, our adversaries and those who wish us ill, our adversaries in the Democratic Party and those who wish us ill in the media are going to jump on this each and every time. But look, it's natural when you've lost the White House to go through a period of sort of mutual recrimination. You want to keep it to a minimum, and you want it to be constructive. So rather than just simply calling each other names, we ought to be focused on what is the agenda for a modern conservative party as we try and get our sea legs back. And we better get it back because the depth of our victory in 2022 depends on it, and B, more importantly, what we do as a governing party, as you know, offering alternatives, offering proposals, offering an agenda matters to the American people for 2024. And what we do in 2022 during the campaign and then in the months afterwards during the legislative session after that is going to matter a lot as to whether or not we get a second term of the Biden-Harris administration, regardless of who's in charge of it, or whether we get a Republican back in the White House.
And when we talk about the Supreme Court and the federal courts, the most radical left-wing law professors are going to end up on the federal bench unless we get the Senate back. So I want to turn to the Senate. And I want to start with a controversial race, Karl Rove, Missouri. Now, I've had as my guests already Eric Greitens, Eric Schmidt, and Jason Love. I'll have the two congresswomen from Missouri on if they declare. And I've also had on Kansas City Mayor Quentin Lucas, who's going to be a hell of a candidate for the Democrats. He's just going to be a hell of a candidate. If we nominate Eric Greitens, it is my conclusion after doing all this due diligence and reading everything, we're committing electoral suicide. Do you agree with me?
I agree. And I listened to your interview, which was very impressive. And you were fair, you were accurate, and he kept stepping in it. I couldn't believe it. I mean, you asked him a simple question. Did you or did you not deploy with a SEAL team? And he couldn't give you an answer. And the answer is, no, he didn't. Now, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that.
Exactly.
No. Yeah. I mean, he could have said, you know what? No, I didn't deploy into combat with a SEAL team, but I was, as a SEAL, put in charge of an important effort with other smart people drawn from the different branches and different backgrounds to conduct intelligence work to identify the bad guys so that the SEALs and others could go in and take them out.
And I got blown up. He could have said that. I got blown up working in this intelligence operation, but he won't. I don't get it.
Well, because inside Eric Greitens, there's a view of Eric Greitens that is, I'm the SEAL warrior. I'm the guy that you're seeing, dropping out of nowhere in the middle of the night and kicking down doors and blowing up bad guys. And he can't deal with the fact that he's not that kind of a SEAL. That's not what his record is. But you know what? He served, and he served honorably. And why he can't just admit the nature of his service is, I think, indicative of what you revealed in your interview, which is that man is a deeply flawed individual. Anybody who breaks his marriage vows and conducts multiple affairs and has one with his hairdresser and ties her up in the basement of his own home and takes pictures of her, that's not a winning message for Republicans.
Now, is it fair to call him a sex crime suspect? Because I believe that's what Democrats will call him, because the Missouri legislature, run by Republicans, did an investigation which is damning, and he would not respond to that investigation. He kept conflating it with the St. Louis prosecutor badly botched investigation and with a campaign finance investigation, because he doesn't want to deal with the investigation into the basement alleged assault.
Look, if he can't give you a reasonable, convincing answer, he's not going to be able to give the voters of Missouri a reasonable and convincing answer. And I mean, I just listened to it. It was like watching a car crash occur over and over and over again. And you're right. The Democrats, fair or unfair, are going to take him apart. And the problem for him is that the people who did the best job of articulating the fundamentals that he has to face, the facts, are a Republican-dominated investigating committee of the legislature.
All right. I just think if they nominate him in Missouri, it's a doomed race. And that's
absolutely.
We're shooting ourselves in the foot. We did that before with Todd Akin in Missouri. Let's go to Ohio. Now, Ohio is a dog pile, and they're all great people. I just had on Steve Stivers. I've had on the Josh Mandel I've had on, Jane Timken I've had on, J.D. Vance. And there are probably more. I might go back and run. What the hell? Everybody's running. What do you think needs to happen in Ohio?
Well, first of all, we need to encourage every one of those candidates to put their focus on what it is they would do and what is their agenda and how will they serve the people of Ohio and advance the conservative agenda, not on trashing each other. And in fact, if one of them goes out there and starts to trash another one of the people in the race, we ought to all sort of say there's a political price to be paid for you running a negative campaign. So put the emphasis on what you want to achieve and how you would advance the cause. And because, look, at the end of the day, yeah, the Democrats may have or may not have a good candidate, but I think the only way we lose this is if we bloody each other up and bleed out in front of the voters of Ohio. So, let's not give them points for taking each other down in some sort of wrestling mania thing. Let's encourage. Say we're gonna send money to and encourage and give encouragement to candidates who are able to articulate a positive and optimistic agenda for what they would do for America. What do they think our challenges are? What do they think we ought to do about them? What do they think conservatives ought to rally around? And let that be the standard by which we judge it.
Now, Karl Rove, we don't have much time, but I want to cover Chris Sununu in New Hampshire, Herschel Walker in Georgia, and whether or not Doug Ducey runs in Arizona. What do you have to say about those three races and whether or not other people are on your radar in those three states?
Yeah, well, first of all, Chris Sununu has been a fabulous governor of the state of New Hampshire, and I hope he runs. I think he would bring a leadership and a temperament to the United States Senate that would be not only good for New Hampshire, but good for the country. Same for Doug Ducey. He has been a superb governor of the state, and I think that he has been the kind of pragmatic, conservative leader who can draw together the fractured Republican Party in that state. Remember, this guy has won twice by high
big numbers,
margins, big numbers in a state that's a battleground state. So I hope he runs. Herschel Walker, actually, I have enormous respect for him. He's my fellow Texan. And despite the fact that he has played such a formidable role for Georgia in his college years, I think we're likely to find that there's going to be some resistance from people saying, well, you lived in Texas for many, many, many years, and now you're moving back here to run for the Senate. So I think there's a young banker in the state who's a University of Georgia grad who's being talked about. I wouldn't necessarily rule out David Perdue. I think David Perdue, though he's reluctant to run again, I think he's a fighter, and I think a lot of people would like to see him re-enter the contest. But we've got to win. We've got to those. Those are three of the four states. The other one being Nevada, where we have to have good candidates on the Republican side if we're going to pick up any seats. Because remember, we're going to have Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina. Three of those are open seats. We've got to win them, and one of them could be an open seat, Wisconsin, and we can't afford to lose a single one of those.
We cannot throw away Missouri. We cannot throw away Missouri. That's. But
the Greitens interview, and anybody who's got a doubt ought to go online and pull up your interview with him and listen to it with an open mind, as I did. And boy, it's devastating. And the problem is not your questions. The problem is his evasiveness in giving you an answer.
You'll be surprised he won't come back, Karl. You'll be surprised. I've offered he will not return, so I don't know if we're going to get him back again. Karl Rove, great to talk to you. Follow him on Twitter, Karl Rove, the Architect.